invest in renewables, and make improvements in societal eco-efficiency. Dr. Donald Huisingh is an internationally known lecturer. He lectures all over the world on sustainability and many different topics about the technology, and he has a broad range of expertise. He's published over 300 professional publications, audio, visual productions, and simultaneously in a wide array of environmental dimensions since 1965. So we're really privileged to have this internationally known expert as our next speaker.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Jim. I very much enjoyed your presentation in the last moments, and I'm going to be following up with you. Okay, let's take a look. Whoop. It's divest, beautifully arrayed. What does it mean? Well, what do you think it means? What does divest mean? Basically, it, by the way, something is wrong with the advancing function. Oh, there, okay. But I asked a question before going into it. Why are you participating today? What do you hope to learn? And what are some of the pathways that we're following now that aren't the right ones? What are some options? Among them, as a way to stimulate changing course, is divestment, taking the money out of where we are investing now, whether it's in oil searching or in coal mining or whatever, and looking for alternatives. So, but why is divestment not enough? Obviously, the reinvestment, the other side of the equation of divestment, needs to be put in there. So let's take a look. And again, it's not, okay. I work in China often, and they have there and in Japan and in Korea, the word for crisis has two characters. It's Ouija this way, danger and opportunity. And just like the name of our conference, from climate crisis to climate opportunity. And so for sure, they have that embedded into their language entirely. What about the road to the future? Sometimes I say, what about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? Now, what kind of future do we envision for a future sustainable society? What will it look like? How will it function differently from current societies? How will we achieve those societies? In other words, what kinds of changes, what kinds of transitions? And how will we know if we achieve them? In other words, we're going to have some kind of measurements to say that was the old pathway, we're on this new pathway, and see how much better this is according to various parameters. And how will we know if we don't achieve them? So those are some of the questions. Now, I'm going to play this one in terms of the rapid change due to one virus, our dearly beloved COVID-19. Notice in January and so on, it's sitting over here. Now watch how COVID really takes off, and this particular dynamic ends in May 20th, I believe. Notice how it's rapidly taking off. Or right now, notice how one kind of entity, in this case the virus, begins to have a global impact in terms of the number of deaths caused from all other sources. Now, that dynamism and that dynamic impact is part of what is awakening many people to say, is there a better way? So in this chaos, where are we going? Okay, back to divest. I want to look a little bit more about what are the reasons for and the motivations for us making a difference and making changes. One of them is we're adding 100 million tons of CO2 to the atmosphere per day. Now that is obviously driving some things. Look at this graph from 1850 to 2016 in terms of average temperature. And of course, you see how it fluctuates throughout the year and from year to year, up and down, up and down. But on average, we're going up with the same data presented in this slide. And you see the Paris agreement was that to try to stay below the 2 degrees centigrade increase over 1850. Well, you see our budget is being eaten up very rapidly. And in that context, there is this kind of sense of urgency as we see the so-called hockey stick in terms of CO2 concentration increase, temperature increase, sorry. Now, I want to look at this because here are data from 1880 to 2017 from about 200 different countries in terms of the average temperature. If they're blue, or light blue or dark blue, they're colder than average. If they're orange and red, they're above average of the 1880. So watch how it's going, and watch soon as we get into the year 2000 and beyond, how increasingly all of them are becoming red or orange. Now, is that fact or is that fancy? We have a lot of data there. So now look at how the carbon dioxide concentrations have been increasing. And by the way, these are data from the Mauna Loa, Hawaii Observatory. And so it gives us a kind of really good emphasis on clarity of way out there in the ocean, what's happening to the overall CO2 concentration. I want to give you a couple of observations. One, CO2 concentration always goes up in winter and down in summer. Why? Of course, photosynthesis. And I'm surrounded by a forest where I'm sitting right now. And photosynthesis is helping to suck out a lot of CO2, which brings us to the kind of idea about 1 trillion plants, trillion trees being planted. They can help, but one of the cautions, don't plant a monoculture. Plant a biodiverse array. I want to emphasize the rate of increase per year of CO2 concentration. And in July 2019, we had 411, and by July of 2020, we had 414. Many are saying we need to get back to 350. We continue to increase, so how are we going to decrease it? This website is an excellent website, and it has information not only on carbon dioxide increases, but also on nitrogen oxide, methane, and SF6, all 4 of which are climate change drivers. And the goal is to see if we can't get that 350 back, if we can't get back to that. Or maybe these symbols will continue to be. And of course, we know about one of the consequences, the rate at which the ice is melting from the Antarctic, the Arctic, and Greenland is accelerating incredibly rapidly. And that brings us back to the US. 13 million US coastal residents are expected to be displaced by 2100 due to sea level rise. And look at the impacted regions. Tremendous on the east and southeast coast, some on the west coast. And in this respect, we could have this number of refugees from Florida, 2 million from, let's see, 3.5, almost 4 million, about 4 million refugees from Florida. So where will they go? And then we have another driving force that almost nobody is talking about, namely the human population growth. It continues at the rate of 88 million per year, and that means 12.9 times the population of Tennessee is added per year. That driver is also part of the equation. We can become more and more efficient, But if we have a continuing population growth, the monster, this is my monster here, he's going to grab us. And I don't know where he might grab or where she might grab. And that's where Divest comes in. When did the divestment movement start? It was started by a group of students. Thank the students. The young people are often kicking us where we need to be kicked. And this was in Swarthmore College. And they started, and they called on their university to divest from coal and other fossil fuels. Other student groups began to do this, and it began to spread. And 350.org's leader at that time, Bill McKibben, grabbed a hold of it and do the math tour and went around, and look what has happened in terms of divestment. It's in terms of billions over here and number of organizations over here. Now, in that context, take a look at this. We've got now, according to these data, about $14 trillion have been divested from investments in coal, oil, and natural gas and pipelines to and then reinvested in renewable energy of all sorts, including, by the way, increasingly not only better hydro, better wind, better solar, but also geothermal and bio-based energies, all of which are, of course, renewable. You see, a large number of institutions have divested, including many universities have taken their investments out of these fossil fuel-based systems and are investing in energy efficiency and in renewable energy. Many of the pension fund groups have divested, and various profit and NGOs, healthcare institutions, and individuals. And that's why I pose in my last question, what is our investment doing with regard to climate change on a personal level? Okay, so these as individuals, and let's see if we can get more individuals involved. Now, some of the challenges that we need to try to get this CO2 concentration back down, but also the nitrous oxide, the chlorofluorocarbons, and the methane, all of which are going up, 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 up. Okay. And one of the big things, of course, is the challenge that was several of the other speakers have emphasized, the the lack of equity. The richest 20%, like the Japanese game, you know, eating up the aspects. Okay, here, 26 billionaires in the US own this, or in the world, own the same wealth as the poorest 3.8 billion people. A new economic system is needed. The present one is going more and more inequitous. And just as one aspect of wastefulness, look, about 12 million tons of solid waste are generated per day. And so one of the questions emphasized by this picture here, wouldn't it be better to simply turn off the taps? That is, not generate so much waste, find some new ways to produce our products, consume our products in a less wasteful manner. It was earlier stated that about 30% of the food that is produced is wasted. There is one source of it. Now, how can we go forward? Well, make no new investments in oil, gas, or coal companies. Instead, sell those investments, tied with them, over the next 3 to 5 years, and invest in climate solutions. There are many types of climate solutions, and I wish I had an hour to really go in depth, but many aspects of renewable energy. By the way, 18 years ago, we moved, after having lived in Europe for about 30 years, we moved back and we bought this previously built and inhabited house that's passive solar design, first parameter. We put 27 photovoltaic panels on the roof 18 years ago with no subsidies, nothing. They paid for themselves with a bit of feed-in tariff from TVA. They paid for themselves in about 5 years. At that time, the price was 85% higher per panel than it is today. So investing in renewable energy as photovoltaics and other kinds of ones is one. But energy efficiency. We've done much in this house, but many others in energy efficiency improvement. Well, similarly, energy efficiency improvement in sustainable agriculture, forestry, water efficiency, reduction of food waste, and becoming more vegetarian, and spread the word to those around. Now, here are some excellent websites. I invite you to access them. The 350.org, the Go Fossil Free, the Divestment, and this bigger one, all of which help to give guidance in helping to capture this opportunity to help change the economic course of investment. More and more banks are saying no to oil companies to go to Alaska or to go to other places to search for energy. Those are the kinds of things that will help. Maybe our monster won't grab us. We'll say,
That's
hey,
a beautiful,
let's
that's
tame
a
the
beautiful
monster.
vision. Yeah,
Now,
thank you.
What can we learn from history?
Dr. Huisingh.
2 minutes. One
Okay.
minute. 1 minute. How many minutes did I have left?
Well, we want to leave some time for questions, but yes, go ahead and finish.
Okay, I'm basically coming. What can we
Okay.
learn from history? What can we learn? And then I ask the question, fundamentally, can we learn? Did we learn from World War II? Did we learn from other kinds of crises? And can we get to the opportunity? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a beautiful picture. And Andrea, do we have questions from the audience that you could ask?
Yeah. So the first question I have, when universities and other institutions divest, don't banks and hedge funds buy up the available shares?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of the phrase. There was some noise here.
Don't banks and hedge funds buy up the available shares?
Some do, but many hedge funds, many banks, many other investment funds are divesting. The number is growing. And even some of the major banks have said no more investment in oil, and in fact are divesting. So from the work that I've done, and I'm not an in-depth economist in this, but I'm seeing more and more the divestment, or saying, we won't give you the money. We won't loan you the money.
Okay, the next question I have is, if you could just maybe share a couple of tips about how someone would go about talking to an organization such as T. Rowe Price about divesting.
Well, I would do my homework and get illustrative examples of other similar kinds of investment companies as to what they're doing. And I'm sure that I would soon have about 20 of the biggest investment companies in my information to emphasize that, look, other companies like you have already divested or have a strategy to divest over the next 3 to 5 years. Of course, most of them don't just go blip and stop investing, but have a strategy for divesting. But in not only in the US, but in many other parts, I work in Europe a lot, and there are many of the companies, investment companies, have totally divested, and many countries have totally closed their coal-fired power plants. For example, Sweden closed its last one a few months ago, 2 years ahead of time, and Germany had closed all of theirs in the last several years. Poland is even doing it, and so on and so on. So more and more countries are setting it as a goal, and as a consequence, one of the things that's really important is re-education of those who are now becoming unemployed.
What if the directors of some of these institutions or businesses say that they don't know where their assets are invested, or that they're invested in a variety of different funds, et cetera?
Well, then I would say they need to do due diligence. If I'm a real professional investor, I need to look at where my money is invested. And certainly some are invested in a wide and incredibly diverse portfolio for good reason. In some ways, you don't put all your eggs in one basket, of course. So having a diversity, but you can find out, where is my money invested as an organization, but also, of course, as an individual.
So speaking of the theme of in an individual, if someone would like to divest their own money from fossil fuel companies, where could they learn about investing in green stocks?
Several of those websites that I gave you on that slide have information exactly to help individual investors as well as major investment organizations, whether they be banks or investment companies or retirement fund managers or whatever. And if you'd like, you can send me an email to this address at the bottom of this slide, and I'd be happy to communicate with you further.
And I think that some people were interested in seeing the slides again. Will those be emailed out or on the website, Jan?
Well, I don't know. You folks are the managers.
I was asking Jan, I'm sorry.
Okay, you're asking
Yeah.
Jan. As far as I'm concerned, please use them. And I have thousands more slides, many more of the dynamic ones that just jump all over the screen. I like dynamic slides, and that's why
they're very
I get dynamism this way as well.
Well, Noel, you, I believe, have a copy of those slides, and I assume that we're going to post all the presentations and make them all available to the people who have joined this conference.
And if you don't get them, contact me at this email address here, and I'll send them to you.
Great. And just one last question I had come in. Is there a list that either you have, or if you know of a resource online of what banks or investment institutions have actually divested?
I have a list of them. I don't have it on my memory bank, but I have a list of them, yes. I think there's about 20.
So someone should email you for that. Okay.
And there's a lot of information. Go to those websites on divestment. They have much of that information already.
Yes, it feels really good to know that your investments personally are working to make this a better world, in addition to your own advocacy. That really helps. Dr. Huisingh, you said something about education of people and getting the word out.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about that,
so
please?
I think this is an incredibly important one in terms of any kind of industry being made obsolete because of climate change, etc. And of course, the coal mining and the oil refining, the oil drilling and the oil refining and the fracking, all of those industries are, of course, employing many people. And some of them are 40, 50, 60 years old and say, oh my gosh, I've been doing this all my life. And we need to provide re-education. Many of the countries are providing re-education for people who are losing their jobs because of the necessary transitions to the post-fossil carbon society. So re-education as a lifelong learning parameter needs to be part of our equation in changing. So, I've been a coal miner all my life. Okay, now I can be a windmill installer and manage the windmill instead. Wow. So that's the kind of thing we need to increasingly do. And that's where our land grant institutions should play an increasingly important role in terms of their extension education on the transition kind of new skills that our people need.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's see, there's also the discussion about there are particular funds who focus on the economy and the environment, because the economy, obviously you don't want to invest in something that's going to lose money.
Yeah.
So, having the economy and the environment linked.
Well,
yes.
there are many, many investment groups that are advising in terms of ethical investment, eco-investment, green investment, responsible investment, sustainable responsible investment. There's a ton of them. So you can take
I
your
think
money.
what you're doing, is providing us with a crystal ball that if we have investments, or if our institutions where we're going to get our retirement funds from are heavily invested in fossil fuels, that our futures could be at risk economically if because you have a crystal ball that you've shown us that these aren't really safe investments anymore.
That's what they are seeing more and more. And I mean, these are, let's say, hard-nosed capitalists making decisions. This isn't where I want my money anymore, as leaders of many of these investment firms. Yes,
Just
yes.
like you wouldn't want to be invested in a cigarette company.
No way.
Yeah, so
No
it's the
way.
same kind of thing, but now we have a crystal ball as to see what the future looks like it might hold.
Plus.
Yeah. Andrea, did you have any more questions?
That was all of the questions.
Okay, may I just add one final thing? COVID-19 is forcing us to look at things in a different way. But please know that there are about 4,000 other viruses that have been documented that are cousins of COVID-19 that could bring our next pandemic. And mainly we're triggering it because of climate change, but also population growth eating up more and more habitat. And that's part of the bigger picture that we need to be looking at. I don't want to end on a sour note, but I want to look at it realistically. We have to have the population growth dimension in our planning equation. And in many places, it is not there.
Well, I think your research indicates that education of women and girls throughout the world is one of the more important things we can do to fight climate change.
Absolutely. And providing not only the education, but the wherewithal to be planning my family responsibly.
Well, this is a great discussion, and I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join. I think
thank you for the opportunity. I'm proud of what all of you are doing. Thank you, Jan. You put an excellent show together, and I'm glad to be a little piece of it.
I've gotten too many accolades. There's so many people that contributed to this. Thank you, Andrea, for asking such good questions to consolidate all the audience participation. And I think we're going now to a break. Transition. Yeah, we have a 15-minute break now. No, we only have a 10-minute break because our next session on this line starts at 2 o'clock, and it's a youth panel, and we have already many of our youth on this panel. Shay and Paige, I see. I'm sure there's some others, and that'll be the solution to climate change, youth, and climate advocacy. The other two panel sessions on the sustainable cities line is environmental justice, hot topic there, and it's really hard to make a decision because on the science and engineering track, you've got the media's role to inform about climate change. So there's a lot of good opportunities here in this next session at 2 o'clock. So we'll pause now, and thank you very much, Dr. Huisingh.
One final thing. Thank you, Andrea. Jim, I want to catch up with you, and I really appreciate what the youth have done because they were behind this divestment movement. They were the kickstarters.
Go youth.